Hello, my friends. Big Mark here, back to talk to you about the secrets behind the red doors. I've got a couple of clips I want to talk to you about, but before I get to that, just let me explain something to you. These stories, I'm trying to give you a little bird's eye view, first-hand knowledge of the Burger Hunter Fish Club and John and the people around him. One thing I'm gonna explain to you in these next coming stories. It wasn't because when he became boss in the media, John was always in the media, was famous. John had an awesome reputation and was well known and respected way before that. And I'm going to tell you some stories about it to make you understand the man's charisma and his personality and the guys around him who, flourished with that. John was John was a hoodlum's hoodlum, but there was a lot of guys like that. He just have a different personality. I mean, I respect them all because for the guys like him and other guys like him, no matter what they did, right or wrong, they had a character, they had an honor, and they kept to it. So I'm gonna tell you the stories, not the stories, the fakes that you see on the internet that don't know them. They think they know them, or tell stories about they hear from somebody else, or knew him the last couple of years of his, before he went away. These are stories, the true makeup. One of the stories about the extremes of John from one end to the other. We had a feast on 101st Avenue. A big feast. Went from a block from 97th Street all the way up to St. Mary Gate of Heaven Church, 103rd Street. It was a long feast. They went partners with the church. Guys had their boots, the club had their block with boots on, everybody, and they were partners of the church. And you understand, that feast was run by, besides John, Angelo, Jeannie, you also had Tony Lee was involved and his guys. Everybody got a piece of this and worked this together from the neighborhood. So, funny story was, John would say, listen, the church hired these rent-a-cops, what they call private security, for security. But every time there was a problem, they ran to the club for help. Now, we did good because John and Tony hired about 15 of us. That time we were making probably $140 a day cash to work the feast, walk up and down it. I mean, we had it made. You were hungry, they fed you at some of the booths, meet girls, whatever it was. And at the end of the 10 days of the feast, we got our lump sum pay. It was a great job. But every time there was a problem, it was 7 blocks long, 6 blocks long, the rent-a-cop would run to the club, we got a problem. We'd send 10 guys up there to fix the problem. But John always said, listen, don't grab these guys and go to work with them in the middle of the feast. I don't want the people to see it. You take them, you drag them down the side blocks before you go to work on them. Great concept, but you don't want the public to see how rough and tumble we are and so. Funny thing is, John's standing by the door, feast is crowded, and he comes out, standing by the door, dressed in slacks at the dresser. Some guy, who knows what he was, half a junkie, a drunk, some neighbor guy. He says, hey, sir, he says, you're the big guy here, you're the boss here, right? And John says, he just like to ignore him. He says, come on, I know you're the mafia guy that runs this feast. And John gives him a dirty look. And he says, come on, I need $20. I just want to get something to eat. And John said, and just ignore him. Said, take a walk. And the guy grabs John by the wrist. Come on, I need $20. I know you can afford it. And as soon as the guy grabs John's hand, John hits him a short right. The guy goes down, moaning on the floor. Everybody runs over. The guys are standing outside the club. That Grim John says, get him out of here. Bring him around the corner. Leave him on the grass somewhere. John turns around, smiling. He says, the guy would have been nice to me. I would have gave him the $20. Grabbing my hand, calling me mafia guy. What's wrong with these people? So John was, short fuse. But then, 15 minutes later, he goes for a walk and he sees a bunch of people with their kids waiting by a ride next to an Italian ice stand. John walks up, okay, who wants Italian ice? Come on, I'll buy it for everybody. He buys like 30 kids Italian ices. You got to see a look on his face. The big smile, little kids talk. But that's the contrast. It was. Some guys couldn't be nice, or some guys could only be rough. That was John from 20 minutes later, from knocking a guy out and getting pissed off to buying the kids ice. Then all of a sudden, a half hour later, we hear people yelling. what's the matter? They had a big Ferris wheel. So what happens? Tony Roach, Tony Rampino, some guy tried to rob a woman's purse. Walking by, grabs a purse, and he starts running. Tony, and a woman screams. Tony happened to be walking the other way, and Tony grabs him with his hands right by his neck. Drop the fucking purse, he tells him. And the guy's screaming. So Tony takes the guy, and there's a Ferris wheel. It wasn't running. Tony hangs the guy on his shirt on the wheel of the Ferris wheel, and he tells the guy, turn the Ferris wheel on. The guy, he says, turn the Ferris wheel. And he lifts the guy up in the air about 20 feet. The guy's hanging from his shirt jacket on the Ferris wheel. And Johnny walks over and he's like, Tony, what's the matter? The guy tried to rob the woman's purse. He hurt her wrist and everything. He says, what are you going to do? So I was going to hang him on his Ferris wheel, make him go around a little bit. He says, take him down, take him down. He's looking at Tony Roach. The guy's hanging from the Ferris wheel. So, this is, so that was that event. So talk about John and his notoriety. John was, I remember one time, it was a guy, Ronnie, who was a gambler. Johnny liked to surround himself with guys who gambled, bookies. I mean, that was him, Philly Broadway, who was a bookie. Ronnie, Big Nose Ronnie, was just a gambler. And Johnny grabs me and his little son Peter. They go into the Pegasus restaurant in the Meadowlands. It just opened up, high-class place, first trackside restaurant where gourmet food. It was real pretty. So what happened was there was a guy that hung around, the Maspeth Club, Sid and Philly Broadway's club, called Frankie Coletti. He was a bartender in that main restaurant. So he got the reservations for Johnny, took care of everything. Frankie was a good guy. So we go there, Johnny says, put sport jacket on, go dress, sits on the first table, right on the glass in the front of the restaurant. And people see him. Here's a guy, handsome. I mean, he has that look, but he has that quality, and people are looking at him. Some guys know who he is, some guys don't. He's dressed fine. We laughing, joking around, we're having a drink, eating food, betting horses. All of a sudden, I see John Turner gets up. Hey, Ralph, how you doing? It's Ralph Branca, famous pitcher for the Dodgers who gave up Bobby Thompson's home run. Say, Johnny, how you doing? I'm fine, Ralph. Ralph supposedly owned Trotters, so he was always in a racetrack. How's everything? How's the family? It's my son Pete. How you doing? It's Ralph Branca. He said, listen, he says, I was just downstairs. He says, Blue Eyes is downstairs with Jilly in the tavern betting horses. He heard you were up here. He wanted to come up and say hello and have a drink with you. So Johnny, being a very, very aware guy, says, tell Frank I love him. There's, who knows up here with cameras. The last we need is me and him together in this public place. I don't want to, he says, I love him. Thank you for that. And he says, so Ralph turns around, and you guys want to go downstairs. So he says, Mark, take Peter downstairs with me, Frank. And Ronnie went down. So we went downstairs. Frankie's there, bet. He's got a tall glass of Jack Daniels. He's got tickets, loser tickets all over. Jilly's hanging around talking to somebody. And Frankie looks up and he sees, hey, he says, Ralph, he says, hey, Peter. He knows that's John's little son. That's little Peter. We go down. How you doing? Bet some horses. This was just that incident that Frank Sinatra wanted to come up and see John. John wasn't the boss. He was a captain of a family that, not much in the press, not at all actually, but that's just his persona, and then there was other situations like that, we get a call. He says, listen, who's by the club? By Richie's club. It's late at night. He says, I answer the phone. I'm there. I forgot who else was there. I don't know. Somebody else was there. Says, meet us by Maspeth. Go by Maspeth, a Cozy Corner bar that was connected to Sid Sestaro and Philly Broadway's club. They owned it. He said, make sure they stay open. I'm coming there. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. John shows up, and a car pulls up behind him, and out of the car gets Bob Hope. I said, is that Bob Hope? He says, yeah. He says, we were in Marty's East. Marty's East was a pretty famous club on the east side of Manhattan. They had cabaret singers, some famous ones. Johnny went there a lot. We went there one evening, about 4 or 5 guys, So happens he walks in there. Bob Hope is in there with Harry Guardino and another old-time actor. I don't know if it was Robert Mitchum or somebody else. They see John. They start drinking with him. They're drinking all night with him. So Bob says, you know, the closing money's up. I got to go. I'm going to a little bar in Mashpit that I own. It's a drink. So Bob says, why don't I come with you? So Johnny's like embarrassed. So it's in Queens, a little sawdust joint. Feeling, you know, it's just a regular joint, go to hang up before they close. So Bob says, John, I come from the slums of England. I've been all the places. Let me come. And they ended up drinking. They locked the doors of the bar, playing a jukebox and talking and drinking. What a regular guy. But this is John's allure back then. I mean, this is the early 80s. So, you know, it wasn't the news media, you know, it was himself. And it just, you know, permeated to this explosive thing in the media. But he had this kind of affection. People loved being around him. Plus, he carried himself well. He spoke well. He dressed well. And he is a classy guy. Besides him being, you know, a tough guy and a gangster and a hoodlum, whatever, he had that other persona. So he could, you know, and that was part of him. So that's what I wanted to explain to you. So these guys don't know that story. These guys weren't around then. They didn't know the real John. So I'm going to let you know piece by piece. That's why I want you to subscribe. Watch my videos, share them. We're going to be in the studio. I'm going to have certain guests. No witness protection guys, no rats. These are guys that are still in the streets, that just want to tell good, fun, real stories, intense stories about that life back then in the 80s. Guys, you know, we want to share with you the real truth that inside, not the fake truth, not the guys who look it up, pump themselves up and make themselves special. I'm not special, I'm just a regular guy. But you're going to get the truth, the 100% truth. I'm not going to beat around the bush here, because you deserve the truth, not the fabricated ones. One last story to leave you with, true story. Johnny comes out of the car by the club. He walks over, Willie Boy's there. Willie Boy drives him. He goes, listen, he says, you got to go to Staten Island. To show you the true fear of John. You got to go to Staten Island. I was supposed to meet Joe the Cat. Now, Joe the Cat was Joseph LaForte. Was around Neil, was a friend, like they call him a friend. Little guy. You know, he looked like he wore a Brooks Brothers suit. Very wealthy, owned parking garages and properties. A great guy. Now, around John a lot. Listen, you know, people can say, well, John didn't like him. They don't know what they're talking about. Just because John curses somebody out doesn't mean he likes them. John had a habit of cursing somebody out when he was pissed off. But otherwise, Joe was around a lot. They did a lot of things together. Joe was close to John. You know, Joe ran to John for a lot of things. You know, Joe LaForte, Joe the Cat was close with Neil Delacroix. So he says, listen, Willie Boy, take Roach, go to Staten Island, the diner. He says, Joe's waiting there. I'm supposed to meet him. I can't make him. Pick him up, bring him back here. He says, you know what? He says, yeah, he feels like he's getting fucked with, abused by some guy, you know, the guy's there, and he wants to leave. He says, you know what, Mark, you go over to him. The more bodies, the better. Just go to pick him up. So we jump in the car. Willie Boy had a Toronado, gray Toronado. He drives, Roach is in the front, I'm in the back, we're driving to Staten Island. He pulls up in front of the diner, park in the car, we get out, we walk in the diner, and we're looking for Joe the Cat. Joe the Cat had just went to the bathroom. We walk in, we see in the back. As we see in the back is maybe about 8 Staten Island guys having breakfast. Paul, Tommy Bellotti, I mean, even Frankie Chico was there. There was a bunch of their guys around there. And Joe walks out of the bathroom. We thought we saw them, though. We see Frankie Chico, we wave, he waves. But when we walk towards the back, Joe starts laughing. And we look at him, we just turn around. Just as I'm here, we turn around and walk out. We say goodbye and walk out. Joe starts laughing. Did you see that? I saw about 4 or 5 guys there turn white, almost choke on their eggs. When they saw Willie, Tony Roach, and the kid walk in there, they thought they were doomed. That made my day. After all the bullshit I went through with them, telling me I'm John's guy, you know, just busting my balls, that made my day. He had this smile on his face. Just used 2 guys and that kid you took with you made them tremble. They thought it was over for them. That's the power of John. That he had to send 2 guys, listen, Willie Boy and Roach, they were killers. They were enforcers. And a lot of guys feared them. So when you have 8 wise guys, besides Frankie knew them. So the other 4 guys, Frankie Chico knew them. The other 4 or 5 guys, I swear, they choked, they ducked their heads. They thought they were done. And I'll never forget that sight. And Joe laughed. Listen, I was there. I was with them. I wasn't the focal point because they really didn't know me. I was such a young, tough kid around John. But Tony Roach, and Willie Boy, I mean, that put the fear of God in them. And all the way back to Queens, Joe the Cat was having a blast with this because, God, imagine if another 5 guys John sent, they probably would have just gone on their knees and prayed. I mean, this is impressive. So this is John's sense of inflicting a little fear. Just let them know that, and it's a funny thing about that life too back then. There were different factions. Man, these are the same family. But, that's what happens when you guys want power, want to make money. But I'll never forget that look on their faces, and Joe the Cat and Roach and Willie were just laughing hysterically. So, yeah, they were probably, a couple guys probably drizzled down their pants. So that's a true story. But there's more stories and more intense, more real. And I'm going to take you along this journey. It's a chronological journey. Only the truth. And we're going to have a show. Hopefully we'll have the set done with the inside of the clubs. I want you to see this. And subscribe, please. Look at this video, subscribe. It don't cost you anything. It'll make our show get picked up. Maybe you can watch a full blast show with more characters involved. But this is Mark. Till next time. Next show comes up. If you're my subscriber, you'll get automatically alerted. And you all have a good day. Be safe.